And one of the channels that I watch is called Freethink, really interesting channel. And one of the videos that I saw on that channel is about this carbon capture device. Okay. And this device is okay. And I pulled up an article. It's on Fast Company. This new device captures CO2 from trucks as they drive. Okay. And essentially what it is, it's like a bunch of really smart students from, I believe, Michigan, from a university in Michigan. They created this device that like attaches to the back of your truck. Okay. And it's a big device. Okay. To give you an idea, weighs about 5,000 pounds. They're custom making everything, and it captures 80% of the CO2. The problem is that big thing is essentially just tanks. And so when the CO2 gets captured, it puts it into the tank, and you have to empty the tank every 600 miles or so. Now, unlike an electric truck, right? Hold on, guys.
Can we cut to how ridiculous this thing must look? Please cut to an image and post-production. Yes. Bam.
Right.
How ridiculous this stupid thing. I'm sorry. This thing must look.
All right. So all right, Alex, let me understand. So I've got a mechanical engineering degree. Okay. And I want to understand how the hell this works. Okay. So I'm driving down the road. I'm producing CO2. First, let's ignore this whole, we actually create additional CO2 and drag by carrying around an extra 5,000 pounds behind us. We'll ignore that fact for a moment. But I'm producing this CO2, and then what's actually happening? Because so if they're putting it in a tank, right, CO2 is like obviously it's a gas. It's a very light gas. It has to be compressed, right? So are they like running a compressor to compress the CO2 on board?
Okay. Excellent questions, Flint. See, this is I like this
because compression is very energy intensive, right? Okay. It takes a lot of energy to compress.
We don't think about CO2 critically. It's not to be
so
thought
we're actually
of critically.
Creating more CO2 to compress CO2.
No. All you need is to just capture CO2, and you're good. You're a good person. CO2 is now somehow bad.
Okay, listen.
You sent a link.
No matter what, CO2 is bad.
Okay, hold on. So first of all, I sent it to you so you could take a look at it. But essentially, and I'll put this on the screen, but essentially it's like these 3 tanks that go right behind your cab, and how it works, to my understanding, okay, I'm not an engineer. I have no idea. But the videos that I watch, they explain essentially there's these beads that they're like tiny little golf balls, essentially. They have dimples in them, and those dimples are the perfect size to capture CO2. Okay. And so these beads capture all the CO2. The other air molecules, whether it's oxygen or nitrogen, they can't fit into those beads because they're too big or too small, and they flow right past it. But essentially what happens is it captures it, fills up now when those beads get full, it then heats up with the same exhaust that you were using. It then heats up that CO2 to pressurize it, and then puts it into the tank. So it's actually a pretty smart system. And
so
like
it's
the
a
students,
filter media, yeah. So they're not compressing
essentially
it. It's a media.
Right. It's the media captures it, and then they use the same exhaust to then heat it back up to pressurize it and put it into the tank. So it seems like a legitimately good solution. My problem is, okay, and you guys are jumping in early, and I appreciate the initiative, but my problem is, but no, hold on, let me explain another benefit really quick. I'm like, this is like a pitch deck, and I'm always pitching my main concern is that you now have to convince 2 parties to install this. You have to convince all of the truck stops to install the deposit tank, because after 600 miles, your truck will just release the CO2 like normal because your tank will be full, right? So it's not like an EV where you have to like just shut down and park and charge for 4, 5, 6 hours, but you can still drive. But until you find a tank to deposit that CO2 that you captured, there's really like nothing you can do. It's just going to sit in those tanks. The other issue, so you have to convince 2 parties, the truck drivers and the truck stops. But the incentive they're giving to the truck drivers is that they will then go sell the CO2, and they will share the revenue from the CO2 that they sell. So concrete apparently needs a lot of CO2. And so they will sell that to like concrete manufacturers or whatever the case may be. And then they'll do some of the revenue share with the trucking companies that install this. And what they said is about 3.5 years after installing this device, you'll make your money back. Open for comment.
Photo though on this website. I mean, I love the innovation. All right. I am all about innovation. I'm all about engineers trying crazy stuff and getting it to work. I definitely hear what you're saying. I'm looking at the photo on their website. This is a contraption, guys. There's about 10 miles of cabling in this thing and control boxes everywhere and plumbing hanging down by the roadway. I'm looking at this as if I'm a mechanic and oh my goodness. I don't want to, I mean, you know, when you put an APU on a truck, when I had a trucking company, right, we put APUs on.
Right.
Those things are like pretty simple. It's like a little small diesel engine, an air conditioning compressor, a little generator, and they were broken all the time.
Right.
Constantly.
Yeah. I had a semi truck too, and mine wasn't working. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Right. APUs are a disaster.
It never worked. And so I'm just looking at this thing like, oh my goodness, how are you going to keep that thing working?
Right. Now, the benefit, of course, is if it stops working or if it's full, you can just run your truck like normal and release the CO2 as normal.
Right.
However, the problem is it is still 5,000 pounds. At the end of the day, it's 5,000 pounds. And, you know, I mean, that's precious weight. You know, drive-ins, what can they scale? 42, 45 maybe. And so it's like now that drops you down to under 40. So that might limit your capacity. So really, I mean, obviously it's not going to be for the heavy haulers, but it's going to be, you know, if you're working, you're transporting lightweight drive-in materials, this might be a good idea. But it's just, I agree. From a technical perspective, it seemed really, really cool. But the fact that
I would love to go see it. If they want to invite me to Michigan, I will hop a flight and I will be there. I would love to see this thing in person. Right now, from the website, I'm a little scared if I'm a trucking company. But this is the kind of thing, right, that you like prototype and you try and you improve, and it takes many years to get to something that works really well.
Right. And they outlined a good couple of issues, which is like, it's funny because it's the same point that they outlined, which is who's going to build out all this electric charging infrastructure is the same thing that also seems like would hinder them. Who's going to build out all this infrastructure for CO2 deposit tanks? Like then you have to pump your diesel and then you have to pull up to the CO2 tank to release it. Because after 600 miles, the tank on your truck is full and it no longer captures it. So every 600 miles, you have to stop and unfill the tanks that you have on board. And so it's like, it is an interesting thing. It does seem like a really cool engineering thing that they're doing. But it does seem like they have some challenges ahead. And I mean, they raised a good bit of money. They have like deals with the Ryder and a bunch of companies like that they're going to start implementing on. So it's going to be really interesting. You know, at the end of the day, the trucking industry, like I think our quote for this podcast is the trucking industry is changing really quickly. You don't have to go through these changes alone. That's what we're here for. So Matt, I know you are obviously a California resident and you love this conversation about CO2. Alex,
anything that touches on this whole idea of CO2 bad, climate change. I mean, if you really dig into it, it's pretty fascinating stuff. I mean, what happens when I exhale? I mean, the whole premise to me, I'm going to challenge the entire premise. When I exhale, what do I emit? CO2. So, I mean, it's kind of like the premise is that anything emitting CO2 is bad. Am I eventually going to put a tank up to my back?
Yes.
When
You're
going
to be a scuba diver, but reverse. They're going to capture.
CO2 is, to me, it's like, it's just getting way out of hand how dangerous this is. I understand the CO2 emissions are up, but how much does that really impact things globally over,
Right.
Yeah, but how much CO2? I mean, and who are like the big contributors to CO2, right? I mean, probably factories and plants, which that's actually pretty easy to capture, right? Airplanes, huge emitter of CO2. I don't know like where trucks fall on the scale. I would love to see.
I think it says 5%. I think on their website it says trucks account for 5% of all the CO2. So it's substantial for how you could say
It's
for maybe small,
but
for how small the industry is. And that's also why Elon Musk talks about it. Like the reason is because like, a very small amount of vehicles account for a huge amount of CO2. So that's why they're focused on the semi as well. So, but it just goes to show you that there isn't a one solution that will solve all of the CO2 problems. There just isn't. It might be a combination of solutions. It might be this thing. If you have a 1999 long nose Kenworth and you want to go make a delivery in California and they require you to put this on your truck, maybe you go do it to keep your nice long nose Peterbilt or Kenworth, right? But if you have an electric truck, then you'll be allowed there fine. But the issue still remains that there isn't a one and done solution. And this is great when, really smart people get together, especially if they're in universities. I think this is in the University of Michigan or something. A bunch of engineers get together and really tackle, put their heads together and have really creative solutions. But that doesn't mean they won't have issues or challenges ahead.